Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I live in the middle of the woods near Birmingham, Alabama, and I go hunting deep in Innawoods near Columbia, Mississippi. Anyone got any good stories? Experiences with stuff in either state? I don't have much about Alabama, but I'll bump with a few things about what we call our hunting club in Mississippi. Eat me because of course I fucking am. First time out at the hunting club. Not the first time I've been hunting. The hunting club is a fucking huge spot of land that used to be an old logging site until they suddenly stopped and wanted to sell. My friend B buys it immediately. He has no clue why they stopped or why they were so eager to sell it after about 5 years of business. Fuck it, it's cheap land, B says. B is fucking loaded, by the way. Which is why he was so happy to buy the land but didn't care about dropping that much cash at once. Anyway, I'm excited to hunt. Haven't had deer in about a year. Grab my gear the moment we arrive and B takes me to a stand he's seen a lot of deer in. Oh yeah, cold weather and a nice book to read. See a few but don't shoot. I've got the whole weekend to bag a buck. Right before sundown, maybe a half hour or so. Hear a howl. Not a wolf's howl, or a bobcat, or anything I've heard before. And whatever it was sounded fucking pissed. Okay. A little spooked, but maybe it's a bear, I keep telling myself. Wasn't even sure if bears howled, but I was willing to believe anything. Then I start hearing it call my name. Not my full name, mind you. My nickname that everyone calls me. Don't recognize the voice. It's deep and gravelly and is having issues saying it. Like what I imagine a Swedish or Russian would sound like trying to say my nickname. Alright, now that's fucking spooky. Scan the area. Don't see anything, don't smell anything. Climb out of the tree stand, pull 1911 and keep my thumb on the safety the whole walk back to my car. Drive back to headquarters. Back at HQ. Another friend T, a middle-aged guy with a son about my age, has been to the club several times already. And shows up while we're eating. We're all shooting the breeze around the fire. T just offhandedly mentions how creepy it can be out at the club. Before I can say anything about what I heard, he starts talking about something that happened a few weeks ago. Said that while he was in his shooting house, he heard his son screaming for help. Like he had fallen out of his tree stand. The problem was that the screaming came from the wrong direction. Texts his son asking if he's okay. Thank fuck we can just barely get a signal. Son texts back that he's back at headquarters cutting up a hog he got. T realizes that whatever shouted for help was not his son. And that nobody else was on the property at the time. T shits bricks and rushes back to headquarters. I tell them what I heard and everyone gets silent. He doesn't let me go back to that stand. Still hasn't to this day. One night I waited a little too long to get out of the stand. Dark by now. Relying on my shit sense of direction and my itty-bitty headlight. Where the fuck did I park the cart? Ain't no way I'm walking back. By this point I had gone in the opposite direction of the cart, but I didn't know that at the time. Just following a small trail, thinking it was right. Everything looks the fucking same at night. Find a small wooden cabin while I'm walking. Broken windows, roof caving in. All the usual spooky shit. Okay. Well, this place was a logging site. Maybe this was like a rest area or something. Oh, but wait. The door's been ripped off of its hinges and is lying in the dirt. Splatters of dark shit on the doorframe. And what looked like a damn deer leg that had been ripped off of its owner balanced in the broken window. Well, fuck me running. Heart is racing. My hands are sweaty, wishing I hadn't eaten B's spaghetti for dinner because I feel a little sick. Turn 360 degrees and moonwalk out of there. Just kidding. I ran the fuck away. Just kidding. I don't want to die. I power walk back so I don't piss off whatever is out here and incite a chase. Finally find the fucking cart. Get back to camp. Refuse leftover spaghetti. Ask B about the cabin. Try to give him a good idea of where it is. B squints and says nothing. Well, alright then. Later that year, I went back to that stand. Out of curiosity, leave my stand an hour before sunset and go looking for that cabin like a dumbass. Well, I found it. Whole thing's caved in. Asked B about it later. He says it was in the way. Needed to get rid of it. This one is super short, so consider it a bonus. Sleeping in our little hunting trailer on the third night we're up there. Nice and cozy. 4:30 a.m. comes early, so we're asleep at 9 p.m. Suddenly wake up to a loud bang and feel the trailer being rocked from the north side of the trailer, the side facing the woods. Wake the fuck up, grab 1911 and a flashlight and rush out with B and Dad in tow. Nothing there. WTF, we did not all just have a mass hallucination. JPG. Shrug and figure that's a problem to think about at 4:30 not 2:30 and head back inside. Dad grabs my shoulder before I can turn and takes my flashlight. Shines it on the trailer. Huge dent in the trailer and a fucking splat of blood in the middle. Like something had cut itself on the crumpled metal of the trailer when it hit it. Don't sleep the rest of the night. Try to follow the blood trail in the morning, but it stops very early in the forest. Plus, I don't want to fucking go near whatever was pissed off enough to smack our trailer. Stay at home that day and target practice from across the lake. B has a lot of friends. This particular one we'll call H. H comes back early one evening telling us he's got 2 hogs and wants some help getting them in the cart. Whatever. Grab a rifle and a 1911 and hop in. On the way, H explains that he killed one decent-sized hog, and it dropped where he shot it, but another hog came out just a few feet away afterwards and he shot her too, but this one managed to get into the brush. Alright, cool. I like tracking, my favorite part of hunting. Get to the spot. Figure we'll grab the one that he dropped immediately first and then get to searching. Drive up, and the hog is gone. Oh boy, here we go again. GIF. Just a pool of blood. And then obvious signs of the pig being dragged away. H is wondering where the hell it went. It's only been 5 minutes since he killed it. Very obvious blood trail into the woods. Whatever dragged the pig away wasn't concerned about being followed. Follow it a bit of a way before we start finding torn flesh and shit. More than a little spooked. H says fuck it. It's just a pig, it can have it, and we kinda power walk back to the cart. Ask if we should look for the other pig. Says he's not hungry enough to meet whatever dragged the first pig away and hops in the cart. Granted, this one was probably due to another pig eating the one he killed. Those fuckers are scary enough on their own. Never typed it out before and I'm doing it in the morning, so bear with me if it's longer than one post. Be Dad, a young cop in the late 60s and 70s. Would eventually move to the FBI, but for now he's a little baby officer in the worst part of town. One officer is proudly showing off his new revolver. A bulldog, nothing special really, but it's huge and intimidating. So police dad gets a call about a disturbance in the neighborhood. He's still working in the shittiest city my state has. Like I'm talking within their first week an officer is guaranteed to see a homicide, it's so bad. Anyway, drive to the house. Guy is shouting in the backyard. Man is waving around a revolver and firing it into the air. I can't remember the make and model. I would have to ask my dad again. But he recognizes it almost at once because he makes a point of describing it when he tells the story. Tells the guy to put the gun down before he hurts someone. Man is obviously drunk because he's waving it every which direction. Slurring his words and barely can stand. Says something about not doing nothing. Dad repeats request. More of a demand now. Well, that was when the man in charge said, somebody ought to shoot that son of a bitch. Poor choice of words. Officer with the bulldog fires 2 shots. Guy's dead before he hits the ground. That was only the first time that gun showed up.
Be me. Dumb 10-year-old. Family lives far away from grandparents because dad works on the railroad. Drive to see extended family a lot, mostly uneventful. Be riding back to my house after staying the weekend with my grandparents. It's late, probably around 8:30 or 9. Even though it is dark, it is the Mississippi Delta. Very fucking flat so you can see a few hundred yards ahead. Suddenly my mom is freaking out saying she can see a person in the middle of the road. Dad doesn't see it, but everyone else in the car sees it. The person is more of an upright humanoid shadow, probably 6 to 7 feet tall. We drive straight through it and we can actually feel it pass through the car. Feel chills and feel like when someone's hair brushes against you. Start freaking out, but nothing else weird happens for the remainder of the trip.
Mississippi Delta. Hi, I'm visiting family in the Delta right now. What a coincidence. I don't have much to share, but all of my experiences were actually while driving in the Delta, so I'll share a bit. Been on the road most of the day. Around 3 a.m. Driving on the highway through a small town. Nothing but bumfuck nowhere that is the Delta up ahead. Barely seen any cars for the last couple of hours. Color me surprised when a semi passes me. Something is in the flatbed. It's covered with some sort of tarp, but I can immediately tell that it's unusual. Round, stubby, made of some sort of metal. It looks like a small flying saucer. I wonder if it isn't a movie prop before remembering I'm driving through the middle of nowhere. The semi-truck was gone just as soon as it came. The rest of the drive was uneventful. There's some farmland in the direction the truck was heading, so it's very possible that they were driving a prop for some show or movie. At the time, though, I was thoroughly confused and half anticipated a Men in Black situation the next morning. Besides that situation, I've seen occasional large shadows either in the road or off the side of the road, like 8 or 9 feet humanoid figures that disappear as I approach them. Those always appear in a specific spot right next to a woodsy area.
This is my uncle's story, not mine. So about 30 years ago, he lived in the bayou in the middle of fuck-all Mississippi. He had a cozy wooden cabin surrounded by miles of swamp land. His nearest neighbor and closest friend lived about a mile away from him. They shot the shit all the time, doing typical hick stuff like hunting alligators. So about the 5th year of living at the bayou, my uncle wakes up in the middle of the night. He doesn't know why he woke up, but he was covered in a thick layer of sweat and was fucking panting anyway. He just lunges for the gun under his bed. He said it was instinctual. Held that gun so hard his knuckles turned white, pointing it at the door. After an hour, nothing happens. He puts the gun away and tries to fall back asleep, kind of embarrassed. His friend calls him. My uncle picks up the phone and his friend is just hysterical. My uncle had to calm him down for like half an hour before he could get any words through. Then his friend said, "Look up at the sky." My uncle took his shotgun and ran outside. The night sky was covered in strange lights. My uncle described them as small, burning balls of fire. They moved erratically and seemed to teleport from place to place. My uncle flips the fuck out, runs back inside and locks his door. He spends the rest of the night with his gun in his hand. Eventually the exhaustion got to him and he passed out. Wakes up with the light hitting his face. Goes outside, still holding his gun. The air has a strange metallic smell to it, and there are no insect noises in the fucking swamp. This is a huge red flag. Uncle calls his friend. Friend does not pick up. Uncle decides to trek to a friend's house. Couldn't take his truck because it stopped working. The whole swamp is silent. Eventually my uncle reaches the house. The place is ransacked. Shit is thrown all over the place, everything is smashed. Friends are nowhere to be found. There are strange carvings in the wood, which my uncle said looked like schematics more than any language. In the bedroom, bed soaked with blood and feces. Uncle goes to call the cops, but they won't pick up. He leaves his friend's house and goes back to his house to wait for whatever weird power outage was going on. Later that day the insect sounds came back, and the air lost the metallic taste. My uncle was beginning to calm down, and the reason was that his friend was kidnapped. The lights must have been dreams. Then a knock on the door. My uncle thinks it's the cops and opens the door. So fucking relieved. Nope. 2 of the tallest white men he had ever seen were standing in black suits. I mean upwards of 7 feet. My uncle's was tall as fuck, but they fucking dwarfed him. They tell my uncles to forget about what he saw. Their voices were deep and guttural. Their faces were like plastic. My uncle's gets pissed and tells them to fuck off. They just stare at him. My uncle shuts the door in their face and grabs his gun. When he opens the door, the men are gone. Then he sees them. His property was a clear lot surrounded by swamp. On the periphery of his property were the men, and more of them. They completely surrounded him. Just staring. My uncle gave in, on the verge of tears. "I won't say anything, I promise." He never saw the men again. He moved away a few months later. Till this day he has no idea what happened to his friend.
So, X, I got some spare time to write, so I thought I'd tell you about a 100% true story that happened when I was just born about a potential run-in with a serial killer. And before I start, keep in mind I have no recollection of events since I was an infant, so I depended on my mom and dad to tell me what happened. Nonetheless, I hope you guys will like it. I think it was around November 1996, but not completely sure. My family is living in Decatur, Mississippi, living near a railroad. My mother is making me formula late at night. I am in my bunk bed asleep, and my older sister, she was 5 and on the top bunk. My sister had her own room, but my mom liked having her in my room because she would have to go the other side of the house to tend to her. She walks back in and sees a layout of a body and head in the window looking at the bed across the room. It's dark outside, so she can't see much. She thought it was just a shadow of a tree at first, but she sees it move around slightly. She panics as she makes out ahead, just watching her stand still in shock. She immediately starts thinking to get to my dad in the other room and get the gun he has. But like a good mother, she doesn't want to leave me and my sister in there. So she calls out my father's name and screams, "Get the gun." He immediately sprung up and got it. He walked in and said, "What's wrong?" And mother replies in a frenzy, "Somebody is out there watching us." He says to call 911 and let the cops know he is out there searching for him, so they won't mistake him for the person. She calls. Luckily the police were nearby, so they get there mighty fast. They see my dad near the shed out back. He tells the police he can hear movement inside the shed. They open the doors only to find the family pet Lulu run out. Whoever it is, he locked the dog in the shed by getting it in there with a piece of raw meat. My dad is shocked and is pissed they didn't get him. The cops search the house and find a chair from the porch propped up next to the window. The window was high up so whoever it was could watch inside. My mom's car was also broken into, but nothing was taken besides the few dollars she had in the car. The police make a report and all. They search around some more and find some prints going out towards the railroad near my house. The railroad also had some shit happen apparently, but I don't know what happened over there. There was nothing else they could really do, so they say to call back if something happened. About a year later, a Mexican man goes around the South killing people near railways, and is nicknamed the Railroad Killer. My mom hears about his conviction and all, and she swears to this day she thinks it was him that night. She remembers in the figure of the shadow. It looked like he had messy hair. I know it seems like she was jumping to huge conclusions, but considering the fact that a year prior to the killings, maybe he was getting started and that's why he didn't do anything. He would also break driver's licenses as mementos. Maybe that's why he broke into the car. Besides for the few dollars there, of course.
Robert Leroy Johnson, May 8, 1911 to August 16, 1938, was an American blues singer and musician. His landmark recordings from 1936 to 37 display a combination of singing, guitar skills, and songwriting talent that has influenced later generations of musicians. Johnson's shadowy, poorly documented life and death at age 27 have given rise to much legend, including the Faustian myth that he sold his soul at a crossroads to achieve success. As an itinerant performer who played mostly on street corners, in juke joints, and at Saturday night dances, Johnson had little commercial success or public recognition in his lifetime. According to legend, as a young man living on a plantation in rural Mississippi, Robert Johnson was branded with a burning desire to become a great blues musician. He was instructed to take his guitar to a crossroad near Dockery Plantation at midnight. There he was met by a large black man who took the guitar and tuned it. The devil played a few songs and then returned the guitar to Johnson, giving him mastery of the instrument. This was in effect a deal with the devil mirroring the legend of Faust. In exchange for his soul, Robert Johnson was able to create the blues for which he became famous. The devil in these songs may not solely refer to the Christian story of Satan, but to the African trickster god Legba, himself associated with crossroads, though author Tom Graves deems the connection to African deities tenuous. As folklorist Harry M. Hyatt discovered during his research in the South from 1,935,193. When African Americans born in the 19th or early 20th century said they or anyone else had sold their soul to the devil at the crossroads, they had a different meaning in mind. Ample evidence indicates African religious retentions surrounding Legba, and the making of a deal not selling the soul in the same sense as in the Faustian tradition cited by Graves with this so-called devil at the crossroads. The blues and the blues singer has really special powers over women, especially. It is said that the blues singer could possess women and have any woman they wanted. And so when Robert Johnson came back, having left his community as an apparently mediocre musician, with a clear genius in his guitar style and lyrics, people said he must have sold his soul to the devil. And that fits in with this old African association with the crossroads where you find wisdom. You go down to the crossroads to learn, and in his case to learn in a Faustian pact with the devil. You sell your soul to become the greatest musician in history.
I got one. True story of what a friend and I experienced last November. Be me. I live in the deep south, hunting deer in the Mississippi Delta. Open fields and patches of trees with deep ditches. Areas with the most trees tend to be swamps. River bends. Friend's dad runs a small duck hunting club, but no one is there except us. Duck season hasn't picked up yet, and the two of us were there to set up several hunting blinds and decided to deer hunt that afternoon. We hunt about 3/4 a mile from one another. He is hunting with a bow in a tree stand in the woods while I hunt on the ground by a pond watching over a field that is hundreds of yards in every direction with a rifle. Pick is my rifle I hunt with. 30 minutes after sundown. Hunting time is nearly up. Hear something near me while I'm watching a few deer. It's opposite side of the pond, if not further, 150 yards wide. I should have mentioned that this was in the bend of a river and trees all behind me, and my friend was all the way on the opposite side of the woods, and the bend in water at the time was shallow enough for deer to cross. Something running my way. I take my rifle and try to see it, but it's too dark. Things begin to scream. I can't figure out what it is. Sounded like a dog's bark but extended. Can't really describe. It wasn't a crane, coyote, or bobcat. I've hunted my whole life. 20, and every weekend. I've spent more time in the woods than most people, and I've never heard of an animal like this. Ignore screaming and begin to grab my things to walk 600 yards to the road. Down to the left of the field where I was hunting is a dirt road where a friend will pick me up. Noise of whatever was screaming was closer and it got quiet. Didn't like that, but I was not afraid. Look up and see the moon rising over the trees. Oh shit. JPEG. Looks like a super harvest full moon. Immediately get serious. Superstitious friend. Walk adjacent to the tree line and stay 100 yards from it. Here's something following me. It's in the tree line. I never unload my rifle until I'm in or out of a vehicle, because of spooky stuff like this and other stories I've heard. Speed walk. I hear it crunching leaves in the tree line and is clearly bipedal. Make it to the road where the power line pole is. Stand against it, as it's where my friend will find me. The problem was that it's only 30 yards from that tree line. Friend should have been here by now. 10 minutes. This thing was there at the edge, pacing back and forth. Have the rifle pointed in the direction. 6 feet 3 and 240. Not too afraid of much. Begin to speak to it. Got a mighty good friend here to deal with you. Go on and see what happens. Dumbass.jpeg. I hear it try to step out of the trees. Only light at this point was from the moon, so I can't see too well. Like a movie. Friend shows up in time. Without turning my back, I get into his truck. Speed off without my say. Look at him, he's spooked as well. I asked why he took so long before I told him what happened to me. He just had it up underneath him. Before it got super dark, something came up to him in those dark woods. He was climbing down and something was underneath him. It just stood there while he was halfway down. He thought it was a curious deer, as he couldn't see but a dark blob silhouette. He told it to get out of here, but it stomped as if saying it's not moving. He decided to stay up that tree until it walked away. It did, but not far, and once he got down and made it to the tree line, he looked back into the darkness screaming hey. He wishes he didn't do that. He, intrigued, it began to trot toward him. He noped out of that and ran close to 700 yards to his truck. I was hinted at something in those fields last year at 5 a.m. I walked out of the house and something jumped off a barn to run. Well, we kept it to ourselves until a few weeks later when everyone from out of state came to duck hunt. We told the story as a kind of joke to everyone, but told everyone older to be cautious if alone out there in the fields. Never had a problem since then. Just joke about giving the duck carcasses to it by throwing them into a ditch. My friend and I basically ran the camp for 8 weekends straight as people came from all over the South. And we always told the story as they asked what's the meme about. One of the last weekends of January I get a call. One of the original members say the evening before, as they were packing up equipment from duck hunting, they saw something. They were in the same place I was alone, and saw it across the river standing the darkness of the trees. Claimed it was standing, but no way human, as it was misshapen. I told him to research what I actually thought it was. A skinwalker. I also said if you do research it, you may never want to hunt there again. I don't know what it was. It screams, stalks, and comes around the camp house, as it was on top of the small barn where the ditch we throw the carcasses in runs by. I don't know. Maybe some anon can guess based on location and characteristics. Never walk in the woods unarmed anons.
Rural Mississippi is terrifying, even in broad daylight. It feels frozen in time. Every single building is caked in dirt and worn heavily. A majority of roads are dirt and plant life is relatively scarce. Red dirt seems to be everywhere with little grass. I don't remember seeing a single flowering plant. I was here in the summer. It feels bizarrely empty despite pedestrians being pretty common. Everybody seems uneasy and asocial, in contrast to the southern hospitality you find in Alabama and Louisiana. Most people seem to be either entirely disconnected from their environments or seem paranoid. Upset. There are few recognizable artifacts to ground it to the world outside. Fast food restaurants, popular store chains, even gas stations seem scant. There are relatively few cars and none of them are new. A pretty large number of the ones I saw were particularly worn or damaged in some way. Peeling clear coat, cardboard, and duct tape covering broken windows. Dents, etc. TLDR rural Mississippi is purgatory.
Lived in a smaller town in Mississippi growing up. Had a lot of paranormal experiences at my own house, but at my grandparents' I had one similar to what you're describing. They had a guest room at their house that I would stay in as a kid. The first time I stayed there, my dad and I shared the bed. I heard loud scratching coming from the wall, which faces outside, in a series of 3 at a time. My dad liked to joke a lot, so I assumed it was him. I told him to stop it, but that woke him up and he said it wasn't him. He went back to sleep and it started again, but I still thought it was him. The next time I stayed there, I was alone in the room when it started. Let me state that these were loud, deliberate-sounding scratches. This went on for about 7 to 8 trips until my family eventually moved to a bigger city. I would have thought it was just childhood imagination, but I went back when I was 16 and it started happening again. I still have no explanation for it. There were no trees outside or that wall that could scratch on it either. My grandmother mentioned at one time witnessing an apparition above her bed at night.
I've got a story. This happened to me about 3 weeks ago. Be a dude in small town Mississippi. Most friends in the area have moved to different places. Mostly chill with online friends I've known for a decade. Been friends with one dude in Missouri for 10 years. Decide to meet up. Friend keeps being wishy-washy. Eventually says his truck broke down. His family was supposed to drive him halfway. His family is super poor and only has one vehicle. Think he's trying to back out, so I say I'll drive the whole way to pick him up. I live in Middle Mississippi. He lives about 100 miles into Missouri. It's about a 5.5-hour drive. Luckily, I have a phone GPS to keep me on the right track. Get there. Meet a friend. He's not a creep or anything. A little weird, but I am too. So it's not like that's saying much. Go eat at a restaurant with him so we can chill out and let me rest for just a bit before heading back. By the time we get back on the road, sundown is only about an hour away. I'm confident in my ability to get us back to my town. Naturally, we get lost after dark. At first, we're just going in the wrong direction. Don't really understand how. Was following the GPS's directions. Suddenly, I just ended up on some backwoods country road near the Tennessee-Mississippi border. Not really freaking out since the GPS auto-corrected us onto a route. The only problem is that Mississippi's major cell phone company, the only one that really has good service in state, is also pretty much exclusive to Mississippi and parts of the Southeast. Connection cutting in and out, GPS on phone not updating properly. End up more lost. But we have a full tank of gas, so we're not going to run out before we're back to an area I know. End up driving over a well-lit dam. Stop joking about how we're going to end up in a creepypasta. Have to piss. No other cars are coming, so I just stop, get out, and piss off the side of the dam. Around this time, friend and I notice a fire in the distance on the other side of the dam. Assume it's a bunch of teenagers having a bonfire on a Friday night and driving to the other end of the dam since the GPS says to go that way. Upon getting close, we see no one is around this massive, meticulously constructed bonfire. Inside of the bonfire are the burning bodies of what look to be coyotes. Something looks like it's writhing in the fire. Nope, right the fuck out of there. Drive about 70 down country roads for 15 minutes in a panic. This was a mistake. Look down at phone, see GPS just won't get a fucking signal to update. Last directions it gave tell us to go back the way we came for about a mile and turn left. And we'd hit a highway in a few minutes. Have to turn around on a really tight country road. By this point, we actually see a truck coming. As they go by, we see with our headlights that the truck is filled to the brim with people. We're talking comedic clown car levels of full. They don't stop us or accost us in any way, so we mind our own business and keep going. Head back up the road. Get to the crossroads where we have to turn. There's a tall-ass dude in the middle of the road. He's dressed like some sort of fucking druid from a D&D game. Raggedy robes and a deer skull tied to his head. The guy points a finger at us but doesn't move. The forest around us seems to go berserk. Crows cawing, freshly blooming leaves rustling like there's a tornado. Pandemonium all around. Start seeing what I think is another guy come out of the woods behind us. Friend had his window down. Leans out, pulls out a fucking pistol of all things, and shoots the deer skull guy in the leg. He kneels, and he roars like something not of this earth. I shit 10 kinds of bricks, floor it, and we zoom down that road. We manage to make it onto a highway but don't stop speeding until we get pulled over by a highway patrol guy in Corinth. Cop asks us why we were going 90. Explain that we saw some freaky shit near the state line. The dude actually seems to understand. You're safe now. I'll let you off with a warning. The way he worded that is what sticks with me. You're safe now. Make it back home. Barely sleep that night because of the adrenaline rush. Somehow. The fact that my friend was packing a gun doesn't faze me at all. I always knew he was a gun nut. Have a relatively normal week after that. Get to shoot some shit. When I have to take him back. Make damn sure that one of my cousins, who are proper rednecks, goes with me and make sure he's armed. Still entertain this stupid fear that whoever the fuck it was that was behind my car could read my license plate and track me down. Still don't understand why someone would be practicing Druid shit in Jesus country. But it's Mississippi. Weird shit happens here all the time.
I live in a small Mississippi town. I worked the night shift at a small motel next to a freeway for the better part of a year in 2013 after I graduated high school. For the most part, I was the only person who was on staff at that hour. The area was fairly nice, but freaky, scary stuff would happen from time to time. 2 times during that year, someone odd and that was pretty bad. Some weird people came through one time. Didn't say anything except brisk answers to the questions I had to ask. Someone came in while the first 2 guys were trying to keep me distracted with a kid in tow, trying to head up the stairs. I asked if they were all together and they all just sort of left. I saw their car ride off, so I called a tip line and informed the cops just in case anything was up. Things only got really freaky when I checked the security tapes and saw they didn't have a license plate. The idealist in me hopes they were just a really private family, but 3 grown men, a little girl, and a nondescript car with no license plate screams kidnapper, Minecraft YouTubers, human trafficking, or all 3.
Were the cops able to find out what was up with them?
Nope, the most I ever heard back from them was that they put out an APB. This was like a week later. None of them had southern accents from the bits I heard them say, so I doubt they were even in the southeast by that point. Here's another one for you guys. I don't know how often any of you deal with Pentecosts, but I find the more extreme ones to be unnerving. Don't get me wrong, the average one is fine. I was friends with a few in my high school days. One night, though, these Pentecosts pulled up in some white van with a church logo on the side. So many of them poured out that it was like a clown car. It was one of the busiest nights I worked there, honestly. Under normal circumstances, it was mostly just a few scattered people that checked in. I made polite conversation, and they seemed normal enough. They were on their way back home from some big gathering in Alabama. Then one of them started talking in tongues. I've always thought the whole talking in tongues thing is BS, but this person sounded legit possessed or something. They all freaked out and it turned into a sort of impromptu sermon in my lobby while I was trying to get these people checked in. Their preacher was with them, and the stuff he was saying about living and dying for Jesus and speaking in his tongue only spoken by those who are worthy of salvation was both scary and probably not in line with their typical beliefs. They eventually calmed down and I got them in their rooms, though. I'm really glad someone else had to deal with checking them out the next morning.
So, I live in a little town in the northeast corner of Mississippi named Iuka. It's a really small town with a population of about 3,000 people. News gets around quickly, people gossip, stories are told, all sorts of things you would expect from a small, southern, redneck-infested town. We have our fair share of urban legends surrounding the town that kids like to hear, but none of them are as famous as Sharp's Bottom. There's another town that's only maybe a couple miles from where I live, and if you go through the woods and along poorly kept trails enough, you'll eventually find the place. Sharp's Bottom is a small, abandoned community of houses. There's a church as well, and the entire place is covered in nature. It's been abandoned for as long as anyone can remember. Now, Sharp's Bottom is not a fucking joke. If you live anywhere near Sharp's Bottom, anyone will tell you that this place is real as shit. Sharp's Bottom is the resident, don't go there or you won't come back kind of place. There have been numerous killings, lynchings, assaults, kidnappings, rituals, burnings, and a slew of other things happen there, tracing history all the way back to the early civil rights movement. It's rumored that the Triple K meets there when they want to raise hell somewhere, which has been happening in recent years. People have told stories about seeing cultists and other unsightly figures there, and there's even a good old monster story surrounding the place. There are a ton of stories about the place, but I remember a few. One of my high school history teachers told me this one. It happened when he was a teenager, and he was pretty old, if that gives you a scope of how long the place has been mysterious. I'll greentext it how he told me. See, a teenager. Redneck as fuck. Go out drinking with friends and driving around in my truck.
Hey Anon, let's go to Sharp's Bottom, it'll be creepy as fuck.
Whatever, we drive down to the place. Could only get there in a truck because of the terrain and going through the woods and stuff. Get to the place. Park the truck. 1 or 2 dudes and me get out to look around the place. Can hardly see because the only thing lighting the place is moonlight. We turn the headlights on the truck off. See the old church. The place looks like it's falling in. Who knows how old it is? Hey, whatever, this place is bullshit. Not that scary. Someone says they have to take a piss. Damn, I do too. We post up against the side of the church and begin the piss. Going smoothly. And then, we hear something. Rustling noises coming from inside the church. Oh fuck. Gif. We backed off a few feet pretty quickly, still looking in the direction of the church. Hear the noises again, only this time, it's closer. Keep in mind that we can't hardly see anything. Hey dude, turn on the headlights so we can fucking see. Dude in the truck clicks them on. As the beams shoot from behind us, and in front of us into the weeds and against the side of the church, we see them. Masks. There are people wearing creepy-ass white masks, a few standing in the brush only about 10 feet away, some standing inside of the church or what we can see of the inside. They're just standing there, staring at us. Fuck, run. Everyone hauls ass back to the truck as fast as possible. They don't come after us. We peel out and drive the fuck out of Sharp's Bottom. My teacher said he never went back there again, and they never told any police or anything about it.
And not much for starting off stories. My name is David. This story has no importance since what's happened has happened, but it still weirds me out. Every year or so, me and my family go on a trip to visit my aunt and uncle in Mississippi. The ass of the US, I'd always call it. We'd usually stay for 2 weeks then leave for home. Nothing really happens seeing as it's Mississippi. There are some nice trees and whatever. There's that and some fat-ass old people who look at me funny because I have tan skin. Aside from the racism and boring shit, the only thing that's ever happened to me was back in 2011 in August. I went to bed after a day of hanging out with my cousin and talking with my uncle about how the white man is always the greater evil seeing where he lived. I didn't see much reason to argue and all that. I remember closing my eyes and letting the night take me, then opening my eyes to see where it had taken me. I woke up to see extending black branches and to feel leaves and twigs poking at me, thousands of thoughts racing through my head before I could even decipher what they were. Some that I caught were, where am I? Where's my shirt? And where's anybody? I was in the woods. Being in Mississippi as a Hispanic with no shirt and no sense of location is one of the most dreadful feelings you'll ever get. I decided that staying still might not be the best idea. So I picked a direction and started walking. The night was so dark, I could barely see past my own extended arms. I estimated that I walked a good 24 minutes or so. That's when I saw light illuminating past a tree. That light revealed the woods to me in greater detail and gave me some relief. Without thinking, I started off towards the light. I didn't even stop at the time to think that maybe this is some camping rednecks or a spreading fire. I just wanted to be back home. I slowed down as the detail of the light became more clear to me, and it revealed people in white robes around a fire. My walk slowed as I realized what I just found. My slow walk came to a halt and my fear pushed me to hide behind a nearby tree. I started tearing up as realization hit me. I didn't want to die, not here and not by these people in the ass end of the United States. I calmed down a bit and decided to wait it out. Maybe my skin would somehow blend to the wood if anyone happened to wander. I had been deftly listening in on them. It wasn't until a couple minutes I realized that they weren't speaking English. I couldn't make out the language they were talking in at all. It barely sounded human. The only noise that could come to mind is a train horn, but in human tongue. My morbid curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to peek from the side, so that they wouldn't notice me. I counted about 8 people, 7 wearing white and 1 wearing some kind of peasant clothes. Like the kind you would see in the old medieval movies. I didn't understand what the hell was happening, but even Hollywood didn't make shit this weird. The 7 in the white robes were slouched, like they didn't even want to be there. I couldn't see the guy in the peasant clothes all that well. It was like he was blurred, probably my eyes just paying more attention to the fire. The fire was small and concealed. I thought it was just so they could see. But as I stared at it, I saw some stones and books in it. I assumed it was good old Richard Dawkins burning away in that fire. Then next thing caught me by surprise. The peasant guy grabbed a torch and put it in the fire. He held it up and made some weird chant. He took the torch to the 7 other guys, my eyes fixed on this man setting his peers on fire. Their screams and struggling rendered helpless by the fire. The peasant man faded away, like he dissolved from vision completely. When I gathered in my head what I had just witnessed, I ran until my feet bled and then some more. That's where the story ends. I don't know what happened that day. I just know that I don't ever want to see it again.
The Pascagoula abduction occurred in 1973 when co-workers Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker claimed that they were abducted by aliens while fishing near Pascagoula River, Mississippi. The case earned substantial mass media attention and is, along with the earlier Hill abduction, among the best-known claims of alien abduction. Description: they described the creatures as being roughly humanoid in shape and standing about 5 feet tall. The creature's skin was pale in color and wrinkled, like an elephant, and they had no eyes that the men could discern and slits for mouths. Their heads also appeared connected directly to their shoulders, with no discernible neck. There were 3 carrot-like growths instead. One where the nose would be on a human, the other 2 where ears would normally be. The beings had lobster-like claws at the ends of their arms, and they seemed to have only 1 leg. Hickson later described the creatures' lower bodies looking as if their legs were fused together, ending in elephant-like feet. Hickson also reported that the creatures moved in mechanical, robotic ways.
Greetings. I've been wanting to share a collection of weird experiences, some mine, some experienced by others. Most of these occur in Mississippi. I'll try to keep them as brief and digestible as possible. Please offer insight and ask questions, and I'll try to answer them. I'll also do my best to maintain some Greentext standards. Black triangles, 1980s, Mississippi. Pic is the most similar image I can find. I remember seeing these, but I was so young. I can remember being in a car safety seat and leaning over to look. I was too young to think this was anything malevolent, or even understand that it was abnormal. It was just a thing like snow, thunder, whatever. More than I remember seeing, I remember my parents and other grown-ups discussing it, and after growing up I know they were trying to downplay their unease to keep me/other kids from freaking out. Details below. Black triangle, not black triangular ship, a literal 2D black triangle in the sky. Like a piece of the video game background didn't render. Only appeared at night. Happened for several weeks, maybe a month, too young to remember. Wasn't flying around, making noises, causing anything else I was aware of. Would just go away after a while, simply vanish, no flash or anything, just wasn't there anymore. Remember Dad telling Mom that police said do not take photographs or video. If we were outside, our parents would be watching the sky. If they saw one, we got brought inside, turn the lights off. Remember Mom saying, "We will talk about that another day," when I asked what they were. Remember it just stopped after a while, things went back to normal. I remember starting kindergarten and talking about it with other kids, but we weren't scared? Asked Dad not long ago, he still has no idea WTF it was. Dad says it was just weird, and shrugs. He says no one ever said anything else after it stopped, life went on. Bad Road, 1990s. This one's more peculiar than paranormal. One road, inside city limits, not a street in the normal sense, side road. Not a very long road, maybe 300 meters at most. Has like 3 to 4 houses, all abandoned. Entire area was fenced off, chain link, barbed wire on top, no trespassing signs all over. Wasn't private property, was a public road almost in the middle of Podunk town. Cops would run you off if you even went near it, patrol car always close by on both ends. Some kids at school claimed to have got in, but stories conflicted/obviously bullshit. Those same kids got pulled out of class by police, left for the day, wouldn't mention it again. Eventually, the entire area was repurposed. The road moved, now it is a big empty lot for construction equipment. Not a single person I know has any idea why this was done. Remember people living there before it was fenced off, houses were normal. People I've asked said the people all left around the same time, then the area fenced off. It's probably something simple and boring, but it sure was an interesting little mystery to us when we were young. We used to have some wild ideas about that area. Human trafficking, about 1993 or 1994. I think. Trailer park in the middle of nowhere, not even in a town. Just this area with one road leading in, dirt roads, etc. RV/mobile home park has been there for a long time, and has been recently upgraded. Some looked like they had been salvaged and thrown together. Law enforcement, UNK type, converge and raid the area. Not sure of exact numbers, but was only like 3 or 4 trailers, just really shitty/dumpy like salvaged. About 20 young adults, teens, kids there. Not sure of numbers, rumor mill was inconsistent about the totals. Mostly white/Hispanic/mixed. Site manager? Super? Landlord? Committed self-end well before the raid. One truck was on site, was used to pick up food from Sam's Club. Bulk, cheap food. People there were malnourished, dirty, sick. Some kids were completely naked, many had no shoes or shirts or pants. Older ones looked like skeletons. News was there, but never revealed much detail because minors. Also was very suspicious, only one story, on one network at night and no follow-up. That I know of. Not sure if in newspapers. Churches in the area did a huge drive for clothes, food, and money to help these kids/youth. Kidnapping and exploitation were the words used, rather than human trafficking.
Hey, recently, I've been reading tons of thread compilations of freaky stories from around the US, and I couldn't help but notice that shit doesn't happen in my state of Mississippi. No cryptids, no Bigfoot, no hauntings or aliens. Despite the background of so many native tribes coming from this area and the Air Force Base and the deep woods all over the state, there is nothing. The closet I've been able to find is the Dogman of Taylor from several years back, but that's about it. Was wondering if anyone has had any scary experiences from around the area? I have a few stories that happened in my house and will tell them if anyone is interested. I'll go ahead and tell my stories because I'm bored and want to contribute something myself. Not really good at green texting, so I will tell it normally. When I was young, my best friend and I used to enjoy doing things to scare each other and psyche ourselves out, despite the fact that we were both mega pussies. We had always found the closet in my room particularly scary. So one time when he spent the night, we decided to go stand in the closet with the light off. My closet is particularly large with double doors that latch via magnet. Now we went into the closet. Sounds sad as fuck, I know, and my younger brother, who was maybe 6 or 7 at the time, went in with us. At the time I was maybe 13 or 14 and my friend was 2 years older. Excuse the shitty drawing, but this was more or less the layout of the closet and where we were standing and the direction we were facing. Now I thought I'd play a little prank on my friend and jab him in the side around his ribs. I had a habit of doing this around the time, and he was super sensitive there and would always jump and make a noise. But strangely enough, there was no response at all. He didn't even wince. In all my years of jabbing his side, he always winced. So I jabbed him a second time and he still gave zero response. I thought this was weird but moved on. Shortly after, we heard a noise behind me and we all bolted out of the closet. Once we exited the closet, we were pretty terrified. I mentioned to him that I jabbed him and he looked at me strangely and said I didn't. I responded with a confused look that I jabbed him the side twice, but there was no reaction. His face dropped and he swore to me that he never felt me jab him. Somehow talking it out, we discovered that while I thought he was standing in front of my brother and me, he swears he was standing behind us. He mentioned the possibility that I could have jabbed some of my clothing hanging off of hangers, but I know for a fact there was flesh behind what I jabbed. There is no way it was just loose cloth. I always considered my friend was just fucking with me. He used to do that all the time, he was an avid liar. But I have never seen him drag a lie out for that long. He will usually come clean with a very, "I got you" attitude. Every time I questioned him, he would swear he wasn't lying. I don't speak with him anymore, but I still think about whether he was lying or not. The only evidence I have is that he didn't wince when I jabbed him, which would have taken a lot of willpower to stave off if it was in fact him. Years later, as young adults, we entered the closet again under the same circumstances. Nothing happened, but we both got this overwhelming sense of dread and panic, and without any correlation, we both burst out of the closet at the same time. This wasn't the strangest thing about all of this. Some background first. My home is within walking distance of my mother's childhood home. My grandparents have moved, but they actually still own the property. When my mother was a young girl, the people who lived in our current house had a girl the same age as my mother. They weren't friends, but they had a mutual friend. The mutual friend used to spend the night in what is now my house, and the room that belonged to me belonged to the girl. My mom met the mutual friend for lunch a few years ago and they got to talking about our house. I mentioned the story about my closet and her friend was very shocked. She said that she believed my house is haunted, but there were two particular spots that she was terrified of as a young girl. One was the attic and the other was my closet. She said that something happened involving my closet, but she refused to tell my mom because she didn't want to scare her. I got my mom to contact her on Facebook a few years ago when I got interested in the paranormal, but she still refused to tell her the story. All this went along with other things that have happened over the years. But they are just small things. Had things go missing and then reappear where I know I looked. The most recent thing, he hearing shoed feet walking down the hallway at night. When my parents get up at night, they're never wearing shoes unless they intend to go outside, which is very rare. I usually assume that's what happened, but one night I heard the footsteps multiple times. So I got up and opened the door to ask what they were doing, but there was no one there. We have dogs, but they are small and their footsteps are distinctly different and make tippy taps from the sound of their claws. The most scared I ever was when I was a kid was one night I was up late in our living room. It was a nice night out, so we had the window open on the back porch. And I heard what was distinctly, again, heavy shoed footsteps on the wooden porch out back. I sat there in fear, but they went away after a while. This one might not have been paranormal, but scared me shitless regardless. I have another childhood friend that I still talk to. I've known him for about as long as the previous friend, and I was speaking to him the other night and he thinks my house is haunted as he's also had small things happen to him over the years. Mostly seeing figures just outside his vision. I should note he's totally different from the first friend, very no nonsense and not superstitious. He also wouldn't lie to me about this sort of thing. The most notable thing he mentioned was, one time, when we were home alone at my place, I was walking down the hallway to my kitchen while talking to him. He wasn't staring right at the doorway while we were speaking, but he thought he saw me standing in the doorway. But then he noticed my voice was further away when I spoke and he looked up and there was no one there. Well, that is about it from my experiences. I have a few stories from my mom, but they're nothing crazy. My grandpa, who used to work for the railroad in Memphis, also had several stories, but he told me several years ago and I don't remember the details too well. I'd have to ask him about it again. Pascagoula, Mississippi alien abductions, October, 1973. On the night of October 10, 1973, 15 different people witnessed a UFO over a housing project in St. Tammany Parish, New Orleans, Louisiana. 2 of the witnesses were policemen. This sighting was only the beginning of what was to occur the next night on the nearby Pascagoula River. 2 fishermen, 19-year-old Calvin Parker and 42-year-old Charles Hickson, were about to have an experience that would forever change their lives. Parker and Hickson were good friends, and often fished together. They were both living in the town of Gautier, Mississippi. On one particular night, they were fishing the waters of the Pascagoula River, when suddenly they heard a strange buzzing sound. The 2 men immediately turned to see what the source of the strange noise was. They were shocked to see an egg-shaped object with bluish front lighting. The object was only a few feet above the water, and about 10 yards from the 2 frightened fishermen. While they sat stunned, a door opened in the UFO and 3 beings of unknown origin began to float toward the 2. The beings did have legs, but did not use them. They literally floated across the water toward Hickson and Parker. The 2 fishermen would later attempt to describe what the beings looked like, saying, about 5 feet tall, had bullet-shaped heads without necks, slits for mouths, and where their noses or ears would be, they had thin, conical objects sticking out, like carrots from a snowman's head. Hickson sat frozen on the river bank. Suddenly, 2 of the odd-looking beings grabbed him, while the 3rd being snatched Parker, who immediately fainted from fear. The beings supported Hickson by literally holding up his body. As they did, he felt numbness over his entire body. By some power he could not see, he floated into the bowels of the object to a brightly lit room. The room had no gravity. He floated while a strange eye-like device moved over his entire body as if it was scanning him. After the eye-like device was finished with Hickson, he was left floating in the room alone. The beings had probably left to examine Parker. Approximately 20 minutes after the ordeal had begun, it was over. Hickson was now floated back out of the craft. Back on the river bank, he could see Parker, who was crying and praying on the ground. Shortly, the strange flying object rose straight into the night sky, and flew away. After collecting their senses and strength, they began to talk about what action they should take. At first they were afraid to report their experience, but they felt obligated to tell someone. What if these beings were taking other people in the area? Fighting fears of public ridicule, they called Kessler Air Force Base in Biloxi. They were instructed to report their incident to the local sheriff's department. Sheriff Fred Diamond thought their story was a hoax or trick. Trying to get to the bottom of their account, the 2 fishermen were placed in a room wired for sound. It was thought that they would discuss the joke between themselves, and their story would be found out. Instead, they continued to talk about the incident and seemed terribly distressed. Soon law enforcement personnel knew that something had certainly frightened Hickson and Parker, and that this was no joke. Very quickly, details of the alleged abduction began to leak out to the public. First, the account of the incident was published in local newspapers, soon followed by the wire services. In a matter of a couple of days, the Pascagoula, Mississippi, abduction was a big news item over the entire United States. Aerial Phenomena Research Organization (APRO) sent University of California professor James Harder to investigate the story. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who represented the U.S. Air Force, also would research the case. Harder and Hynek did a lot of the investigative work together. The 2 well-known researchers first interviewed the 2 fishermen together. Harder tried to do regressive hypnosis on Hickson, but the abductee was so frightened that the hypnosis was stopped. To get things off on solid ground, both of the witnesses took polygraph tests, and both passed without a problem. Harder and Hynek both believed that the 2 tormented men were telling the truth. Esteemed UFO researcher J. Allen Hynek would proclaim that there was definitely something here that was not terrestrial. Even after 30-plus years, both Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson still testify to the same story, and have never wavered in their account of what happened that October night on the Pascagoula River.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.